So welcome everybody. The theme for today's webinar is Project Essentials, Planning, Funding and Evaluating Your Community Project. And over the next hour, we'll provide some top tips, whether you're starting a new project or refining an existing one. The impact of church-supported social action projects is significant. Churches in England run or support over 33,000 social action projects, including food banks, parent and toddler groups, debt counselling, community cafes, and much more. The House for Good report from the National Churches Trust reported that UK churches generated £55 billion of social value annually, based on the economic and social value of church buildings, local investment and church-led activities. And church-supported projects contribute to social cohesion, addressing isolation and loneliness, as well as providing opportunities for participation and volunteering. I'm delighted that we're joined today by three people with expertise and experience in this area. Peter Smith is Parish Development Worker from Wellsprings Together, a charity based in Leeds that supports faith communities in social engagement across North and West Yorkshire. Clinton Cameron Seeley is Operations Director from Transformation Cornwall, a charity that works with others to strengthen faith-based social transformation across Cornwall and runs a popular Meet the Funder event. And Sophie Edwardson, who is CUF's Listening and Learning Officer and has a background in research and evaluation. Our programme for this morning includes input from all three of our contributors, plus a time for questions and information about practical tools and resources from Church Urban Fund. There's a lot to get through, so I'm going to hand straight over to Peter, who's going to start by sharing some tips and advice for getting started with project planning. So over to you, Peter.
Well, thank you, Polly. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm just going to give you very much of an overview of project planning, and it's really based on three things, really. One is that people are coming in with little or no experience. It's a new area of work for you in your context. It's primarily, we're aiming at smaller and local projects rather than the large scale ones. And we recognise that in talking about this, it can be very different depending on whether you are in an urban context or in a rural area. So, bear that in mind as we go through. Moving on. The first thing I'm going to say is there a need. I'm actually going to say that I'm coming from a Christian context from my own experience. So going from a Christian motivation, but recognise that there are other faith groups and community groups who come with perhaps slightly different motivation, but often going in the same direction. So I'm assuming that there's partnership and meeting of minds around a lot of this, wherever you're coming from in your life. So is there a need? I used to work in a surveying firm, and my colleague who was a planner said there's two questions. The first question, is there a need? So there's a number of things you can do to establish, is there really a need? Is it just me thinking there's a need? Am I just responding to the person who knocked at the door yesterday because he was homeless? Do we have a homeless problem? It's not just subjective. A lot of these needs we can establish an objective view about. So we're looking at how can we establish whether there's a need, looking out of our own bubble. So one thing to do: put together a questionnaire and create some feedback, create an area of discussion around this need. It can be on social media. It can be by going to professionals you may know in your district and asking them. It's a really important thing to find out what others who've got some experience in your area and some insight. Go and find out what they think. you may even decide that the general public will have a view that which you would value. So again, there are different ways of doing that, different types of questionnaire, which could be paper-based or online. And if you need any ideas about how you could do that, you can come back and talk to me about that. We've got different versions of those depending on what you need. Secondly, reviewing the data. So you need to find data that has been collated for your area and for the particular need that you are looking at. So, for example, CUF have a lookup tool. You may already know that. To get an objective view, we have something called Local Insight we use, which is a program where we can look at a number of different metrics, if you like, sets of data. It could be all sorts of things: housing, health, education, crime, loneliness and isolation, even mental health, all sorts of things that can be reviewed. So there is data out there. There's a lot of it. It's just a question of finding perhaps the right data for what you need. Should this need be met here? That's the second question my surveying friend, my colleague, would say. It's not just is there a need, but is this the place to meet it? Is it in this location, whether that's a church building or in this particular town? Is it by us? Is there someone else better suited or better placed? And is this the right time? Are we actually doing this at the right time? Should we be planning for the future? And if so, who do we partner with? I think it's quite rare nowadays that people just go in on their own without reference to any other group or any other service that's going on. I think partnership is a really strong thing, provided you can find a basis of agreement of your values, and you can find a basis for going forward, that you basically have similar objectives and aims. So moving on, Polly. So what is it you are wanting to do? What is the need that you've decided you need to meet, and perhaps you've decided that it's to be met in your context? There are two types of project, aren't there, really? One is ones that are already there, which you would then be just partnering with. So off-the-shelf projects, I suppose you might call it, things that are already going on in other locations where actually you could just extend that. And there are quite a few examples, certainly in the kind of Christian and community context. And for example, you may know of CAP. So they've got CAP job clubs, and you've got TLG, which offers educational support. You've got Trussell Trust, if you're thinking of a food bank. There's all sorts of different groups who have a clear basis, a clear ethos, a clear way of working, and have built that up over a number of years. So clearly aligning with an existing organization is helpful and important. But you need to know what that's going to involve for your group and for your organization, whether that's a church or any other group. What's the cost of that? What's the level of commitment? What am I agreeing to? How much am I paying for? Is it staff? Do I get resources? Do I get training and advice? Do I get marketing and publicity? And when do I get it? Is it just before the project, or is it beyond launch and going forward? Following on from that, have you got people in your existing church or organization who share your vision? Are you a sole practitioner? Are you able to gather people around you who have a similar value and vision? Because their strengths and gifts probably will be hopefully complementary to your own. You can't do everything in setting up a project. You need to have a team around you, and you need to be able to kind of maximize those gifts and insights and experience to make the project work. And also, if you know, I'll take a CAP job club as an example. Speak to another project in a nearby location, another town, and get an honest appraisal about how they've found the acting with that particular organization. You know, have they found it easy? Have they found them responsive? So you get an idea of what you're meeting. If, however, you're coming up with your own project and your own vision, I think you probably need even more time to reflect. Is this something completely new, not off the shelf? I would say, you know, you need to give that really strong consideration. You need to know that this is definitely the way forward. Going on, Polly. You need to get that perspective, not just from your friends and family. You need to go wider, I think. So you need to speak to your church, and group leaders, maybe charity group leaders. Is this in line with the objectives of the church or the organization? Are there then other stakeholders, those with an interest in your locality? Are there local businesses, charities, and groups who have a view? Are you going to be offering something that's contrary to their view, for example? Or are they going to be aligning with what you have in mind? What does the council think? What does your local NHS representatives, what do they think? Go and have a chat with them, see how it fits in with their perspective. And there are other groups in your area who may well be worthwhile speaking to. So we have in our area, I don't know if it's called the same in every area, community anchor organizations, groups who are charged with coordinating the voluntary community and social enterprise group, or sometimes called VCFSE, by the way, which is to put faith in the middle of that, which is, I think, a better way. But it's called VCSE generally. So your coordinators, those who are organising response in your community around community issues, local councillors at different levels, your mayor, if you've got one, or MP, even your bank or funding advisor, which may also be speaking to funders, which Clinton will talk about later on. So again, Polly, moving on. Just as an example, this is one that I've got involved in. We started by accident. We really did. There's no planning involved whatsoever, I'm afraid. We just started because another funder fell out and we felt passionate about supporting a group. We started with 4. And over the years, it's grown to quite a big operation, and it's, from my perspective, it's completely unplanned, so completely against everything I've just been talking about. But sometimes that happens. Actually, sometimes that happens. But we provide a wellbeing space, a place of welcome, and we have learned so much about our community. It's very much of a triage of establishing exactly what the needs are in your community. So I would recommend that. That's one of the things we do as Wellsprings, is recommend places of welcome to you. So on to the next slide, please, Polly. Yeah, so you've decided you have a need that you are wanting to answer. You've built a team. You've done some mapping in terms of, you've established some needs, you've established some data. So you need to create a simple plan. You have to do a bit of an audit check, what have we got in our hand? What have we got available to us? What premises, what skills, what equipment, depending on what you're doing, of course. What resources have we got? Do we have to have transport, storage, admin, all these things? It's worth looking at it and think of it not just for your startup, but also what's the direction of travel for this? What's it going to look like a bit later on? Have some things in mind, even though they may not be necessary to start with. Put this all into a document, I suggest. Call it a business plan if you're a business person, call it a case for support if you're a community person. It doesn't really matter. It's the same thing. Build up a case for why you're doing it, what you're going to be doing, and how you're going to do it. And my advice is probably call it a pilot. A pilot's great because a pilot means you can try it and see, and if it doesn't work, you can change it, and you can reinvent it. If you're starting something and you're saying, right, this is what we're doing for the next 10 years, you'd rather sort of putting yourselves in one position. Whereas a pilot is flexible. You can measure things after the pilot's finished. You can go, how did that go? What do we need to change for the next version? So continuing on. Yeah, consider what you need to do before you start. So do you need some training? Do you need to have some expertise or some established expertise in certain things? What documents do you need to go forward? What policies do you need to put in place? come and talk to us and probably to Clinton as well about that sort of information. How do you need, what agreement have you got, maybe for your premises, your hire agreement if you need one, or for your agreement with the partner that you are working with going forward? And then consider your publicity strategy. How are you going to put this out to the general public? How is it going to be promoted? Think about the wording that you need. Think about the messaging that you need. So my comment on this is one of our place of welcome in our space, and it's just the sense they just started a new one. We just felt it was for such a time as this, in that particular church at that particular moment, they needed to start a place of welcome. So there they got on with it, and I would ask you: is it a time for you for such a time as this? Are you involved in social action? Are you involved in your community for such a time as this? And then finally, although you can't see it because it's at the bottom of the page, but those are some of the resources that we can offer. These are some of the things that we're involved with: places of welcome, growing good from Church Urban Fund, and community audits, and anything else on the left hand side that might be of help. And then our contact details are there, which on the next one, which you can have later on.
Yeah,
there we go.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. That felt like a really comprehensive overview of what we should all be thinking about when we begin to start thinking about delivering something in and with our local community. And as Peter said, we will share contact details in the email that you receive after today's webinar, along with the recording and all the slides. So if you're furiously taking notes, don't worry, we will be sharing the slides, so you will have time to review the content of the slides in your own time. So I'm now going to hand over to Clinton, who is going to focus on securing funding for your project. So you followed Peter's advice and you've got a great plan, but now you've got to secure some funding for that plan so that you can deliver your project. And that's what Clinton is going to focus on for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So over to you, Clinton.
Thank you, Polly, and thank you, Peter. You set the scene nicely for me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar this morning. So I'm going to discuss strengthening funding success. And just to put some context on this, I also have my own CIC. So everything that I'm going to tell you, I've actually been through this. And some of these things are difficult to go through, but you have to go through this in order to get funding, or at least have funders take your project seriously. So I'm going to start with governance, everybody's favorite topic. And there's some key things that you need to know here. So it's just your clear roles and responsibilities, policies for risks, safeguarding and data. Make sure you have clear documented decision-making, regular board meetings and performance reviews, and that all builds funders' confidence and trust. So governance is the foundation for any credible organization. It defines how decisions are made, who is accountable, and how organizations remain transparent and effective. Funders want to see that there is a structure and integrity behind the vision. This means having clear roles between, I say trustees, but I don't actually have any trustees in my CIC, so it could be directors, or it could just be like a management team, but it all really boils down to the same thing. So everybody knows where responsibilities lies. Good governance also means having the right policies in place, such as safeguarding, data protection, equality and diversity, and the financial controls. It's about showing that your organization isn't just well-intentioned, but well-managed. Show that you have regular board and performance reviews, which helps ensure continuous improvements and demonstrates to funders that you take oversight seriously. You'll find going forward that funders now spend a lot more time on the governance of your organization. So you may have a fantastic idea. And the reason that we do these things is all because we're passionate about giving something back to the communities that we serve. But what funders want to see is that the governance is in place to allow you to be able to do that. And once they've had that confidence in you, they're more likely to give you the money to make your project viable and worthwhile. Then I move on to, I say trustees, but it could be directors. So the key things here, again, is to make sure your board is diverse, is skilled, covers financial, legal, and some lived experience. Lived experience is becoming really important now when you're talking about projects. Make sure that you have your day-to-day controls in place and who is legally responsible for any decisions that are being made. Make sure you have ongoing induction and training, and engage with your directors or trustees to show that you have strong leadership. Again, what funders want to see is that whatever board that you have in place, the leadership and accountability is there, and that's the thing that's driving your organization's mission. A diverse board with financial, legal, and community experience strengthens decision-making and credibility. Your board should focus on strategy, not just operations. Their role is to set vision and hold management accountability for delivery. One of the key problems is if you get funding, funders want to know that you can deliver that project. So it's easy to say, I want to do this in my community, but you actually have to show how you're going to do that. They also have a legal responsibility to act in the best interest of the charity, ensuring compliance and financial stewardship. Make sure that you do some training so that everybody that comes into the organization understand what the organization is about, and you always remain making sure that you stay legal and compliant. Funders often ask now about the board. How are they engaged? How do they form the community that you're serving about what you're doing? So make sure that you have, at the minimum, I would say that you need is 4 board or directors or trustees meeting a year, and make sure that they're documented, because a lot of funders now are asking for that information when you apply for funding. The third thing I want to cover off is, and sorry that I'm going quickly, but we only have 15 minutes, so you can always contact me afterwards if you need more information, is financial planning. Link budgets to outcomes. One of the key mistake that people, and I've done this myself, the key mistakes that people make when they're doing a funding application is your figures don't add up. So you may be asking for 20,000, but then you've asked for like 25, or you've asked for 15, and then there's a gap. And that then sets alarm bells ringing. So just make sure that everything that you do is linked to your outcomes. Include all your costs, including admin, your monitoring. I've said here contingency, but a lot of funders now won't give you contingency funding. We just recently applied for some funding, and they wrote back to us to ask us to take out the contingency. So I would probably say leave that out if you're doing that funding application form. Show your forecasts and your reserves, and then show just a clear, transparent financial information. Strong financial planning demonstrates that your organization can manage funds wisely. It's also about linking money to mission. Every pound should contribute to outcomes. Include all relevant costs, not just direct delivery. As I said, admin, monitoring, evaluation, and having reserves and multi-year forecasts reassures funders that you're planning beyond the life of a single grant. What funders want to see now is not just, we've just given you a pot of money, go out and do what you're doing. They want to also see if you've got some tools in place to make your project sustainable after you receive that grant. And if that doesn't make a lot of sense, I can always explain it to you after. You can contact me after this meeting. But the transparency is the key. Explain where figures come from and why they're realistic. Good financial planning builds trust and positions you as a reliable investment for funders. Yeah, think of your funders as an investment, like you're going to the bank to get that money. Show that transparency to them. The key thing that I would say to you is know your funders. Do some research about them. Align your outcomes with their priorities. Use their language and terminology. Build a relationship and seek feedback. Communicate progress after funding. Funders aren't this scary being that they used to be. They want to give you that money, and they want you to reach out and get to know them. Knowing your funders is about understanding what drives them. Each funder has priorities, values, and target outcomes, and they fund projects that align with these. Before applying, research their mission, read about past grants, and identify the outcomes they want you to achieve. They tailor your proposal so it mirrors their language and priorities. This isn't about changing your work, it's about framing your project in a way that resonates with their goals. Building relationships matters too. A phone call or a short email before applying can help clarify expectations. And after funding, communicate regularly. Update progress reports and impact stories help build long-term partnerships. And funders are always keen if they see a really great project that they funded, the likelihood if you go back in again, they're going to recognize that and you could get funding from them again. Some of the tips and pitfalls that needs to be covered off is make sure that you tailor each application. Please use evidence and data. A lot of people do funding grants, but there's no evidence or data that there's a need for it. Show impact clearly, write in plain English, and avoid over-promising, missing criteria, or weak evaluation plans. Fundraising success often depends on the quality of your application. Avoid jargon and write clearly. Plain English makes your proposal stronger, and don't overpromise. Just be realistic. If you think that your project is only going to hit 50 people, then just put 50 people. They respect your honesty. About finding funders, one of the, I'm not going to cover this off too much because we're finding funders. One of my roles is to help people find funders. So you can just reach out to me directly for that, and I'll cover off that. But if you're looking for it, there's many places that you can go on the internet to find a funder, but I can help you with that. Again, it's about finding the right funder for your project. The types of funding depends on your types of project that you're going after. So you can have core funding, which is your day-to-day costs, project funding, capital funding, seed, or that's pilot and innovation, match co-funding from other sources, or in-kind, which is like goods, services, or expertise. Understanding funding types helps you target the right opportunities. Core funding supports general running costs, your staff, your rent, admin, and gives you flexibility. Project funding is restricted to specific activities or outcomes. So if you're saying you're doing a project for young people, then that's what it's got to be aimed for. And that's the most common and less flexible. Capital funding is for buildings, for capital infrastructure. Seed funding supports innovation or pilot projects, while match funding requires you to contribute a portion from elsewhere. A lot of funders now are asking you to match fund part of your project. So if you're asking for 10,000, they may want to see that you've gone out and raised 5,000 on your own through fundraising events or in-kind donations, etc. And then the final takeaway, I really apologize. I feel I've really raced through this. I'm sorry. But the final takeaway is fundraising is about relationships, not transactions. Build trust, show impact, and demonstrate governance. Fundraising success isn't just about writing applications. It's about building genuine relationships. Funders want you to invest in people and organizations they trust. Show that you're transparent, well-governed, and delivering real community impact. Follow up with reports and updates that prove outcomes and gratitude. When funders see that you take partnerships seriously, they're more likely to fund you again. Remember, every interaction, an email, a report, a phone call, is part of that relationship building process. And I hope that was useful for you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, Clinton. Thanks for sharing from your experience, and also some really helpful, I think, up-to-date information that some of us maybe won't have heard before about the way in which the way that funding and the way that funders are approaching applications has maybe changed in the last couple of years. So that was really helpful to hear. Thank you. Can I just also clarify that when you talk about directors or trustees, we could kind of substitute PCCs and church councils, that they fulfill a similar role really as trustees and directors. Yeah. So if it's a church project, it's your PCC, your church wardens, or your church council and church leadership team. Great. So one of the things that you'll want to consider whilst planning your project, and also when applying for funding, is how you're going to evaluate and demonstrate the impact of your project. And so Sophie Edwardson from CUF is going to join us now. And Sophie is our listening and learning officer, and also leads on our monitoring and evaluation work. So Sophie, I invite you to unmute now and share with us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Polly, and thank you, Clinton and Peter. You have both really set me up to now discuss evaluating your project's impact. Definitely a good consideration to have in those early project planning stages. And as Polly just noted, I'm Listening and Learning Officer at Church Urban Fund, so responsible for the monitoring and evaluation across our programmes and also for storytelling. So it's been my privilege over the last 3 years to think about as CUF how we look at our monitoring evaluation frameworks with some of the grant projects and other resourcing that we're involved with, but also then visiting grassroots projects and seeing how different churches, other faith groups, community groups are using some of our resources and evaluating the impact those are having in their local communities and parishes. So just moving to our first slide on evaluation, looking at the why of monitoring and evaluation. So certainly monitoring and evaluation can be a brilliant way to celebrate the successes of your project. Also really important to tell the project story, as Peter noted earlier on in the webinar, from kind of pilot to established project, what has that journey been? Monitoring and evaluation can be a key part of evidencing the impact that your project has had for participants, partners, volunteers, whoever is engaging with that particular project. And as Clinton mentioned as well, demonstrating accountability to your funders. M&E can play a key role in allowing funders to see how their contributions are being used and what outcomes are being achieved. And also an opportunity for you to kind of take stock of the things that were anticipated and outcomes that were perhaps unanticipated, but have had impact for those engaging with your work. M&E is also really helpful for looking at how we can be improving and developing our project work. When I've been on visits to different projects across the country, I'm really struck by the kind of deep-rooted motivation people have, potentially through a faith motivation, to engage with their local communities and make a difference, and a transformative difference in the lives of those engaging with their projects. And M&E can be a brilliant way of approaching that continuous improvement so that you reach your aims and have a positive change for your participants in kind of ever-changing context, climate, other things that can impact the lives of your participants, service users, volunteers, etc. And then just noting again around sustainability and the future, M&E can be really helpful for learning and adaptation by reflecting on results. You gain insights into how to grow and improve your project, and to measure and share real impact with your project funders, which may help to secure further funding, future funding, ongoing year-on-year funding. Brilliant to have an M&E framework and results from that to look back on and present to prospective funders. Just moving now to the monitoring and evaluation how. So the method by which we can be looking at the impact that our project work is having. So early considerations can be how the method by which you are seeking to evidence these impacts. This can be both quantitative and qualitative methods. So thinking about what you might build into your framework. With quantitative measures, you could look at the number of attendees, potentially noting through observational method the number of young people, potentially the number of meals, baby bank parcels, whatever it is that can be some quant measures that you can draw out of your project work. And then looking at qualitative measures as well. These are descriptive, non-numerical. They can be more geared towards the experience of your participants, the motivations for why they are engaging with your project continually, and the perceptions they have about your project or the experience that they've had, the journey that they've personally been on. It can be helpful as well to consider the type of tools that your sample group will engage with. I think sometimes we can produce a really brilliant M&E framework with everything in mind of what we would like to evidence in the impact of our project, but actually if that's something that our participant group struggle or won't engage with, then it's really hard to then evidence those impacts, even if those are things that you have observed without linking with your participants directly. So just thinking of different types of tools that could encourage engagement. You've got surveys, interviews. You could do something around a log or a quiz. Observational data certainly can be important. Just thinking as well around kind of digital measures. So this could be with a Mentimeter quiz or something with Kahoots, ways in which we can be creative with the type of tools that we are developing to evidence those impacts that we're seeing in our participant group. And I'd just recommend the NCVO. They have some brilliant examples of M&E frameworks which have been applied to different scales of projects in different contexts, and would be helpful just to take a look at when considering the design of your M&E framework and how you'd like to engage participants of your project work. Also really helpful to think about intervals. I think we've all had many kind of feedback interviews or surveys or things we don't remember we've subscribed to in our inboxes. So always helpful to consider the intervals by which you are seeking to evidence the impact that your project is having, bearing in mind what it is that your funders are requesting of you, if that be quarterly, annually, monthly, and also looking at how you can engage your participant group without maybe overloading them with repeated tools, which then inevitably they may tire of engaging with unless they are very creative. So you could think about weekly, quarterly, 12-monthly evaluation tools, potentially pulse surveys that happen monthly. Building that into the design of your project means there's no potential surprises for participants coming along and is really built into the ethos of what you're developing with your project participants, and I think will reap a greater insight into results of the impact that your project is having. So just moving to our next slide around two, I'm also conscious there's loads of photos of me in these slides, but these are just the ones of me actively out there doing some of this M&E work and gathering some stories. So just noting here the consideration of the participants in our monitoring and evaluation approach. Considering a representative sample, can you engage a broad group, potentially engaging all participants? Is that possible? Looking at depth work with those who have participated longer term across maybe a number of years that your project's been running, or but not discounting shorter term engagement with your project. What have those initial perceptions been? What's kept people coming back, maybe even from that first week to the second week if it happens at those intervals? Those are all really interesting insights that can help evidence the impact that the project will have for the participant and has had should they have engaged over a longer period of time. And just looking as well, it's really good to consider drawing other project partners into your M&E framework, and that can build capacity in terms of what it is that you gather, thinking about engaging volunteers, maybe partners that you are signposting your participant group to. What have they seen in terms of the impact that your engagement with the participant has had for those that they're then engaging with? So interesting to think not just about your project design and the impact that it's having for direct participants, but actually the impact that that's had for volunteers, the capacity building and engagement and collaboration with other project partners who are joining in with the project work that you are undertaking. And then another consideration certainly is the accessibility, as I noted previously, of the M&E tools, ensuring that those are something that our participant group can engage with, and also the consideration of self-reported and observed measures. How can we draw together an accurate picture of impact? I've had opportunities to chat with people and had some brilliant impacts about their experience engaging with a project, but maybe it's also talking to them in a setting with a volunteer who's worked with them over a period of time, who can give greater insight into maybe some of the other aspects of their journey which they might not be able to see from themselves in that moment. And I think that gives a broader understanding and insight into the impact your project is having for individuals. And then just looking now at a little bit more of a depth piece of work with voice advocacy and stories. Sorry, Polly, I think it's just one slide back if that one's there. Brilliant, thank you. So just looking at some more qualitative measures, some more depth pieces that you can do with participants who are engaging with your project. Certainly voice advocacy and stories is something that us here at CUF are looking to step more into. And just a note here to the way that facts and figures are important, but personal stories can inspire and create deeper connections. And decision makers often have priority areas of support focus, but may not have direct access to the personal stories that smaller grassroots and community projects encounter daily. So just to note there that as project leads, those who are engaging on a regular basis with the needs of participants in the local area and project design, you are expertise in what it is that the local community, those within your parish, will engage with and have been impacted by, and shaping that story and being able to share that with funders, potentially local government, other charities that you are collaborating with, can provide a real insight into the things that are making a difference at the grassroots level, and with a view to expand that maybe in another area with a different context, but with a similar project design and needs. So always thinking, I think in M&E, about how we can listen to people's stories, but that be a part of our active listening, pulling that into a framework, stories and outcomes that we can share with others. And just a consideration here around including your participants, volunteers, project partners. Also, in addition to the methods, some of the kind of media that you can use to gather those stories. So thinking about written stories, video stories, photo stories, how will your participants best engage with that process, and what will be impactful for funders who may have limited time, or government who have limited time, to really get a sense of the impact that your project is having. And then just noting some key considerations under consent, so clarifying the usage and providing any participants who are engaging with your framework information. Safeguarding, certainly thinking about anonymity and choice, and policy and influencing, speaking again to that next step of, once we have this kind of wealth of stories and insight from the M&E framework that we have engaged our project in, what is that next step for change for a broader group, wider population across your region or potentially the country. And then just going now to our next slide, which is all around a checklist for your consent forms. So just speaking to this one quickly around key things that you should be including in your consent forms when engaging any of your participants in an M&E process, particularly with stories where you are capturing voice, some personal details potentially within that, what you want to ensure that you are gathering in that consent form. So that would be agreement to participate, an indication of whether that participant is comfortable being named specifically. It is certainly possible to include participant reflections anonymously, but just ensuring that we have the permissions either to name or keep that individual anonymous. Consent for the story conversation to be audio recorded. Find this to be quite helpful so that you can engage without having to write loads of notes during the conversation. And I think that encourages a more in-depth conversation with your participants. A method of contact if an update is needed, and that can be optional. Some people might not have access to email, etc., and we wouldn't want that to exclude them from being part of the M&E process. A signature and date, and being able to scan this consent form and then store it in a secure place for future reference, so you have that reference of consent if required. And then just noting some evaluating project impact reminders. I'll go really quickly through these ones, but just as some final reminders, an M&E framework is a key part of strong project planning, considerations of who you are as an organisation, as a church, as a community project, how you've identified the need for your project in this context, what you aim to achieve, and why is now the right time. And establishing these factors can help you identify those key impact measures and give you a reference to reflect back on to identify any seen and unforeseen outcomes. And just to note again that funders are really interested in M&E built into project design. And if you conducted a pilot, as Peter noted right at the start, do include findings, interim findings of this to identify those impact measures from an early stage in your project planning and design. And just a final M&E checklist here. Just to consider your M&E framework project at an early stage, define the impact that you want to have, note what funders and partners are interested in, what responsibility do you have as a project to report back to your funder on key measures and targets, select appropriate methods for measuring success and identifying tools, and consider engaging participants certainly, but also volunteers and project partners, and analyse and reflect on evaluation findings to enhance future work, what was expected and what was unexpected. And there's just a note on the next slide of a few resources, including some project planning and evaluation guide in our CUF resource bank, but I think Polly will note a couple more resources. But if you would like to get in contact about anything to do with monitoring and evaluation and with your project, please do so. I'd love to have a follow-up conversation with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you for reminding us of the real value of the stories of the impact of smaller grassroots projects and organisations, which sometimes, as you said, funders and other partners just don't have access to in any other way, and it's great when we are able to sort of amplify. I just wanted to draw your attention to 3 resources from Church Urban Fund that might be relevant to the topic of today's webinar. The first is our guide to project planning and fundraising, which is designed to help churches and small community groups. And it covers a lot of the information that you've heard today, plus some other helpful tips and ideas, and it gives you everything in one place. Many projects involve the necessity to recruit and to then manage volunteers. So I wanted to highlight our guide to working well with volunteers, which is very comprehensive. It was written by somebody who is an expert in managing volunteers. And we also have a link to a webinar that we held earlier this year that was on that topic of working well with volunteers and what to do when things go wrong. And finally, back to this idea about gathering data and mapping. Many of you will already know about the CUF lookup tool, which is helpful if you want to find out more about who lives in your community and to discover some of the local needs and priorities in your community. And many churches and community groups have used the lookup tool to help with planning and to help with applying for funding. And you can find all of these, they're free to download on the CUF Knowledge Bank. And again, we will share links to all these after today's session. The final thing I want to do is to thank our contributors, Peter, Clinton and Sophie. I also wanted to remind you that our next webinar is coming up in November, and that's on Stories for Change, and it looks at the power of stories to help us see our communities differently and to help us listen to our neighbours.